The fire crackles, a steady, rhythmic breath in the quiet of the night. Outside, the world is hushed, perhaps blanketed in the gentle fall of rain, or held in the crisp, still air of winter. Here, within these walls, there is warmth, a soft glow that dances across the room, casting long, shifting shadows. It is a scene of profound peace, designed to soothe the edges of a weary mind, to lull one into a restful slumber. But tonight, our journey into rest will not be through conventional tales of comfort or dreams of far-off lands. Instead, we will explore the deeper, more unsettling currents that flow beneath the surface of our collective human experience. We will peer into the shadows, not to be frightened, but to understand the stark realities that sometimes pierce the veil of our ordinary life. We will tell stories of true crime, not with sensationalism, but with a quiet contemplation, allowing the disturbing echoes of these events to resonate softly, like the distant rumble of thunder on a summer night, or the whisper of wind through an empty house. These are tales of the unknown, of the inexplicable, of the darkness that can take root in the human heart, and how it ripples outwards, touching lives. Leaving an indelible mark, let the flickering light of the fireplace be our guide. A beacon bells the encroaching darkness of the narratives we are about to unfold. Let its warmth remind us of the fragile comfort we seek, even as we delve into the chilling depths of what humanity is capable of. We will speak in hushed tones, allowing the atmosphere of safety to envelop us, even as the stories themselves speak of profound unease. Our first journey into the unsettling begins not with a known monster, but with a phantom, a shadow that moved through the landscape of Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s, leaving a trail of terror and cryptic messages. This entity, self-named, became known as the Zodiac Killer. His story is a chilling testament to the power of the unknown, the lingering dread that an unsolved mystery can cast over generations. It is a tale that speaks of profound intelligence, twisted into malevolence, of a desperate need for recognition that manifested in the most horrifying ways. Imagine, if you will, the serene beauty of the American West Coast in the late 1960s, a time of great social change, vibrant culture, and a burgeoning sense of freedom. Yet, beneath this glittering surface, a sinister current began to stir. The first strike came on the night of December 20th, 1968, on a secluded stretch of Lake Herman Road, just outside Vallejo, California. Two teenagers, David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were on their first date, enjoying a quiet moment in Faraday's Rambler. The night was crisp, the stars abundant, the typical backdrop for young love and hopeful futures. But their innocence was shattered by the arrival of an unseen assailant. A car pulled up behind them, its lights glaring. When Faraday exited his vehicle, perhaps to ask for assistance or to inquire about the other driver, he was shot once in the head. Jensen, attempting to flee, was shot 5 times in the back. Both died at the scene. The crime was brutal, seemingly motiveless, and left local law enforcement baffled. There were no witnesses, no immediate clues, only the silent, tragic tableau of two young lives extinguished. The quiet road, usually a lover's lane, had become a desolate tomb. The absence of motive, the sudden, unprovoked violence, it all hinted at something deeply disturbing, something beyond a simple robbery or a lover's quarrel. It was an act of pure, unadulterated malice, a chilling preview of the darkness yet to come. Less than 7 months later, on July 4th, 1969, the nightmare returned, again in Vallejo, again targeting young people. Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Mike McGough, 19, were parked at the Blue Rock Springs golf course, another secluded spot, a place of quiet contemplation, now forever stained. A car approached, then departed, only to return minutes later, pulling alongside them. The driver exited, walked to the passenger side window, and without a word, opened fire with a 9mm Luger. Ferrin was killed instantly, struck multiple times. McGough, critically wounded, somehow survived, though he bore the physical and psychological scars of that night for the rest of his life. As the assailant drove away, he turned back, shining a flashlight into the car to confirm his gruesome work, then fired 2 more shots into the bodies before finally disappearing into the night. This second attack, so similar in its execution, immediately linked it to the Lake Herman Road murders. The police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, but they had no identity, no real description beyond a vague sense of a lone, methodical individual. The fear began to creep into the community, a cold tendril of dread. It was after the Blue Rock Springs attack that the killer truly began to reveal his disturbing nature, not through direct contact, but through a series of taunting letters sent to 3 Bay Area newspapers, the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. These letters, arriving within days of the attack, were meticulously crafted, filled with chilling details of the crimes that only the killer could have known. He demanded that his letters be published on the front page, threatening further violence if his demands were not met. And then he signed off, not with a name, but with a chilling symbol, a crosshair with a circle around it. This was the birth of the Zodiac. The letters were not merely confessions. They were a performance, a macabre game. Each letter contained a segment of a complex cipher, which the killer claimed, once solved, would reveal his identity. He boasted of his superiority, perverse his intellect, his perverse enjoyment of his deeds. The publication of these letters sent a tremor of fear and fascination across the nation. Cryptographers, both professional and amateur, scrambled to decipher the codes. The first cipher, known as the 408-symbol cipher, was quickly cracked by a high school teacher and his wife, Donald and Betty Harden. The decoded message was not a name, but a disturbing ramble, a distorted philosophical treatise about collecting slaves for the afterlife. I like killing people because it is so much fun, the decoded message read. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. This was the true voice of the Zodiac, a chilling declaration of intent, a glimpse into a mind utterly devoid of empathy, the casual cruelty, the chilling self-assurance, painted a picture of a predator who saw humanity as nothing more than prey. The Zodiac's reign of terror continued, escalating in its audacity and depravity. On September 27th, 1969, he struck again, this time at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, a picturesque lakeside retreat. Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were enjoying a picnic near the lake. They were approached by a man wearing a black executioner's hood with a crosshair symbol emblazoned on the front. He carried a pistol and a knife. The killer tied them up, speaking to them in a calm, controlled voice, explaining his intentions, almost as if he were performing a ritual. He then proceeded to stab both Hartnell and Shepard repeatedly with a foot-long bayonet. Shepard died 2 days later from her wounds. Hartnell incredibly survived, providing a detailed description of the masked assailant and his chilling demeanor. On the door of Hartnell's car, the killer scrawled in black felt-tip pen the dates of his previous attacks and the crosshair symbol, followed by knife. This was a clear message. This was the Zodiac, and he was escalating. The hooded man, as he came to be known after this attack, was not just a killer. He was a theatrical monster, a performance artist of death. The sheer audacity of the attack in broad daylight, the meticulous planning, the terrifying costume, it all spoke of a killer growing bolder, more confident in his invincibility. Just 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, the Zodiac committed his most brazen and public murder, not in a secluded lover's lane, but in the bustling heart of San Francisco. Paul Stein, a 29-year-old taxi driver, picked up a fare at the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets. Stein drove his passenger to Washington and Maple Streets in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. There, he was shot once in the head, play at close range. The killer then leaned over Stein's body, ripped off a portion of his blood-soaked shirt, and calmly walked away. The incident, though tragic, would have remained a simple homicide had it not been for a crucial error by the responding police dispatcher. The initial report wrongly stated that the suspect was a black male, leading patrol officers to overlook a white male seen walking away from the scene, who matched a witness description. This individual, later believed to be the Zodiac, was seen by 3 teenagers across the street who called the police. They saw him wiping down the interior of the taxi, then calmly walking away. When police arrived, they actually spoke to and released a man matching the Zodiac's description. Due to the erroneous dispatcher report, the ripped piece of Stein's shirt, along with another taunting letter, was soon sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, proving beyond doubt that this was another Zodiac victim. This letter contained a boastful claim that he had been chatting with police officers near the scene of the crime, underlining his terrifying proximity and the frustrating failures of the investigation. The fact that the Zodiac walked away from a murder scene, interacted with police, and then bragged about it, was a source of immense public fear and police frustration. The Zodiac continued to send letters, ciphers, and threats to newspapers and police for several years, though the confirmed murders ceased after Stein's death. He claimed many more victims, but these claims were never substantiated. His letters were filled with cryptic puzzles, philosophical ramblings about his superiority, and disturbing fantasies of building a paradise, his spelling of slaves in the afterlife. He reveled in the chaos and fear he created. He threatened to bomb school buses, to shoot people from hilltops, to unleash more terror. Each letter was a carefully orchestrated performance, designed to maintain his notoriety, to keep the public and the police in a state of perpetual fear and bewilderment. We seemed to derive immense pleasure from the intellectual game he was playing, daring the authorities to catch him, knowing full well they were unable to decipher his true identity. The investigation into the Zodiac Killer became one of the most exhaustive and frustrating in American history. Multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Vallejo Police Department, the Napa County Sheriff's Office, the San Francisco Police Department, and the California Department of Justice, worked tirelessly, but often in isolation. Hundreds of suspects were investigated, thousands of tips pursued, but the killer remained elusive. Handwriting analysis of the letters, witness descriptions, ballistics, none led to a definitive identification. The Zodiac was a master of evasion, or perhaps simply incredibly lucky. His ability to vanish, to leave minimal forensic evidence, and to confound even the most dedicated investigators, fueled his legend and deepened the public's fear. The case became a consuming obsession for many detectives, a shadow that stretched over their careers, haunting their waking hours and perhaps even their dreams. The legacy of the Zodiac Killer is one of enduring mystery and pervasive dread. He was never caught, never identified. His true identity remains one of the most hotly debated cold cases in criminal history. Countless books, documentaries, and films have explored the case, offering various theories and potential suspects, but none have provided the definitive answer that victims' families and the public desperately sought. The Zodiac faded from public consciousness as the years passed, but his specter continued to loom, a testament to the chilling reality that some monsters simply disappear back into the shadows from whence they came. The quiet terror of the Zodiac was not just in his brutal acts, but in his profound anonymity, in the knowledge that he walked among ordinary people, lived an ordinary life, while harboring such a chilling capacity for evil. He was a whisper, by in the wind, a fear that settled deep in the bones, a reminder that not all questions have answers, and not all monsters are apprehended. His story is a lullaby of unease, a testament to the unsettling power of the unknown. As the embers shift and settle in the grate, let us transition from the phantom in the shadows to a different kind of darkness, one that hid in plain sight for decades, woven into the fabric of a seemingly ordinary American life. Our next story takes us to the quiet, conservative city of Wichita, Kansas, where a man lived a double life of unimaginable horror and chilling banality. For years, He was known only by the sinister acronym he gave himself: BTK, bind, torture, kill. This is the story of Dennis Rader, a man who epitomized the disturbing truth that evil does not always wear a mask, but often blends seamlessly into the everyday. The nightmare for Wichita began on January 15th, 1974. Joseph Otero, a 38-year-old father, arrived home from his night shift to find his house in disarray. Inside, the scene was horrific. His wife, Julie, 33, and two of their children, Joseph Jr., 9, and Josephine, 11, were found dead, bound, and strangled. Their 15-year-old son, Charlie, had hidden, escaping detection by the killer who had spent hours in their home. This was not a random act of violence. It was methodical, depraved, and seemingly without immediate motive beyond the act itself. The method of binding, the quiet suffering, the violation of a family home. It sent a shockwave through the tightly knit community. This was an unprecedented act of terror for Wichita, a city accustomed to relative peace. The police investigation was wise, immediate, and intense, but clues were scarce. The killer had left little behind. A few months later, on April 4th, 1974, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle, the city's main newspaper. It was a chilling confession to the Otero murders, meticulously detailing aspects of the crime that only the perpetrator could have known. The letter expressed a strange mix of regret and self-aggrandizement, claiming the killer was driven by an urge he couldn't control. He signed the letter with a peculiar X symbol. The police now knew they were dealing with a killer who was not only brutal, but also intelligent and deeply narcissistic, desperate for recognition for his horrific deeds. This marked the beginning of Dennis Rader's macabre relationship with the media and law enforcement, a perverse dialogue that would span decades. The BTK moniker was self-assigned by Rader in a letter written in October 1974. He described his method of operation, binding, torturing, and killing his victims, and reveled in his self-proclaimed genius. He toyed with the police, offering clues, retracting them, playing a sadistic game of cat and mouse. He was a ghost, a phantom that stalked the quiet suburbs of Wichita, striking seemingly at random, then vanishing without a trace. After the murders, Rader continued his spree, targeting single women living alone. On April 28, 1974, Catherine Bright, 21, was found dead in her home, bound and stabbed repeatedly. Her brother, Kevin, was also attacked, but survived, providing a description of the assailant. This was a critical piece of information, though it would be decades before it led to Rader. The pattern of intrusion, the binding, the intimate violence, all pointed to the same killer. The city was gripped by a quiet, gnawing fear. People began to lock their doors, to check their windows, to eye strangers with suspicion. The sense of security, once so pervasive, had been shattered. Then a lull. For nearly 3 years, BTK seemed to disappear. The silence was unsettling, perhaps more so than the active reign of terror, because it suggested the killer was still out there, simply biding his time. This was a common tactic for Rader. Periods of intense activity followed by long stretches of dormancy, allowing the fear to fester, to become a constant, low-level hum of anxiety in the community. He re-emerged on March 17, 1977, when he broke Tell You How To into the home of Shirley Vian, 24, bound her and strangled her to death. Her 2 young children were present in the house. A terrifying detail that underlined Rader's profound lack of humanity. The next victim was Nancy Fox, 25, on December 8, 1977. Again, she was bound and strangled in her home. In each case, Rader left behind few clues, meticulously cleaning up after himself. A chilling testament to his careful planning and chilling precision. These new victims, all women, all seemingly chosen at random, deepened the sense of helplessness in Wichita. The police seemed no closer to catching him, and the killer continued to mock them with his macabre communiques. By the early 1980s, the BTK case had gone cold. Tips had dried up, leads exhausted. The city tried to move on, but the shadow of the unseen killer remained. Then, on April 27, 1985, BTK struck again, murdering Maureen Hedge, 53, and taking her body, which was later found dumped on a rural road. This was a departure from his usual method of leaving the bodies in the home, suggesting an evolution in his twisted ritual. Then, on September 16, 1986, Vicky Wiegerell, 28, was murdered in her home, bound and strangled. And finally, on January 19, 1991, Dolores Davis, 62, was his last confirmed victim. He bound her, choked her, and left her dead in her home. After Davis, the letters and the murders stopped. The case went deeply cold. Years turned into a decade, then 2. The public slowly began to believe that the BTK killer was either dead, imprisoned for another crime, or simply had lost his urge to kill. The fear never entirely dissipated, but it receded into the background, a chilling piece of local law. What made the BTK case so uniquely disturbing was the mundane life Dennis Rader led during his decades of terror. While the police searched frantically for a monster, Rader was living an unassuming life in Park City, a suburb of Wichita. He was a family man, married with 2 children. He worked as a security alarm installer for ADT Security Services, then as a compliance officer for Park City, dealing with animal control and code enforcement. He was a Cub Scout leader, a church council president, a seemingly upstanding member of his community. He was the neighbor, the colleague, the man you waved to on the street, the personification of the banality of evil. He lived among the very people he terrorized, perhaps even interacting with the families of his victims, all while harboring a monstrous secret. This dichotomy, the polite, religious family man versus the sadistic, depraved killer, is what truly makes Rader's story so profoundly unsettling. It shattered the illusion that monsters are easily identifiable, that they lurk only in dark alleys or isolated places. Instead, he showed that they can be the quiet man next door, the one you least suspect. The BTK case remained cold for 13 years after Dolores Davis's murder. Then, in 2004, the letters started again. A series of bizarre communications were sent to the media and police, filled with cryptic clues, photos of his victim's ID, and even a doll posed in the manner of one of his victims. He seemed to crave the attention, the notoriety he had enjoyed in the 70s and 80s. This renewed contact rekindled the cold case investigation, bringing in a new generation of detectives and forensic technologies. The police, learning from past mistakes, played a careful game, communicating with BTK through the media, trying to lure him into a trap. In one of his most audacious acts, Rader asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. Police, through a carefully orchestrated message in the newspaper, advised him that it would be safe to send. Rader, believing their deception, sent a floppy disk in February 2005. This proved to be his undoing. Embedded in the metadata of a deleted document, on the disk was the name Dennis and the specific name of his church. This tiny, almost imperceptible detail, combined with DNA samples collected from previous crime scenes and an old pap smear from his daughter, finally provided the link. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. The quiet suburban compliance officer, the church leader, was unmasked as the notorious BTK killer. The revelation sent shockwaves across Wichita and the nation. People couldn't believe it. Their mild-mannered neighbor, their Cub Scout leader, was a serial murderer. His confession, delivered in court with chilling detachment, was as disturbing as his crimes. He described his acts in clinical, almost academic detail, showing no remorse, only a strange pride in his projects. He spoke of Factor X, an unknown force that drove him, an inner demon he claimed to be unable to control. He explained his urges as a form of sexual deviance, a need for power and control. His calm demeanor, his meticulous recall of every horrific detail, painted a terrifying picture of a mind utterly fractured, yet perfectly capable of navigating the complexities of everyday life. Dennis Rader was ultimately sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, effectively ensuring he would die in prison. His capture brought a form of closure to the victims' families, though the pain of their loss and the horror of his deeds would forever remain. The story of BTK is a stark reminder that evil can hide behind the most ordinary of faces, that the monsters we fear are sometimes not creatures of fantasy, but the people we pass on the street every day. It's a tale that lingers, quietly unsettling, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable truth about the darkness that can reside within the human psyche, waiting for its moment to emerge, even as the fireplace glows with comforting warmth. The fire sighs, a gentle reminder of the passage of time, of stories told and shadows explored. These two tales, of the phantom Zodiac and the suburban BTK, speak to different fears. The terror of the unknown and the terror of the familiar, both, in their own way, illustrate the chilling depths of human darkness. We have begun our journey into the quiet, unsettling, as the flames dance and dwindle, allowing the warmth to seep into your bones. Let the echoes of these stories settle, not to disturb your sleep, but to remind you of the complex tapestry of life, even its most unsettling threads. There is more to explore, more shadows to gently illuminate. The fire continues its gentle dance, each flickering flame a tiny, ephemeral performance against the deepening darkness outside. The whispers of the world beyond these walls fade, replaced by the soft crackle and pop of the burning logs, a calming rhythm that grounds us in the present moment. We have explored the shadows of the unknown and the familiar, glimpsing the chilling capabilities that sometimes reside within the human heart. Tonight, as the embers pulse with warmth, we will delve deeper into the unsettling, not with tales of lone predators, but with stories that speak to the insidious nature of control, of manipulation, and of the hidden horrors that can fester beneath the veneer of ordinary life. We will explore how darkness can take root, not just in an individual, but in a group, or within the very walls of a seemingly unremarkable home, turning it into a prison of unimaginable suffering. Let the comforting glow of the fire be a steady hand in the encroaching gloom, a quiet assurance that even as we navigate these disturbing narratives, we do so from a place of safety and contemplation. Our first story takes us back to a pivotal moment in American history, a time of radical change and burgeoning counterculture, where dreams of peace and love tragically warped into a nightmare of unparalleled brutality. We will venture to the part hazy summer of 1969, to the canyons and hillsides surrounding Los Angeles, where a charismatic and deeply disturbed man named Charles Manson orchestrated a series of murders that would forever stain the myth of the Summer of Love, leaving an indelible mark on the national psyche and becoming synonymous with the most extreme forms of cultic depravity. Charles Manson, born in 1934, was a man steeped in a lifetime of institutionalization, poverty, and crime. From a young age, he cycled through reformatories and prisons, accumulating a rap sheet that included burglary, assault, and pimping. He was a product of a deeply troubled upbringing, bouncing between relatives and various state-run facilities. Despite his lack of formal education, Manson possessed an undeniable, albeit twisted, charisma. He was articulate, cunning, and exceptionally adept at reading people and exploiting their vulnerabilities. He cultivated a messianic self-image, blending elements of Scientology, the Beatles' lyrics, the Bible's Book of Revelation, and his own unique brand of apocalyptic paranoia into a bizarre, intoxicating philosophy. When he was released from prison in 1967, at the height of the Summer of Love, he found a ready audience among the disillusioned, the rebellious, and the lost souls flocking to California seeking enlightenment and freedom. Manson soon gathered around him a motley crew of young, impressionable followers, mostly women, who became known as the Family. They lived a nomadic, communal life, moving between various homes and ultimately settling at the Spahn Ranch, a dilapidated former movie set in the remote Topanga Canyon. Under Manson's absolute dominion, the family members engaged in drug use, petty crime, and free love. More chillingly, they were subjected to Manson's relentless psychological conditioning. He stripped them of their individual identities, their names, their families, and their moral compasses, replacing it all with unwavering loyalty to him and his increasingly bizarre worldview. He preached an imminent, apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter, borrowing the title from a Beatles song. According to Manson, the black population would rise up and decimate the white establishment. But, lacking the organizational skills, they would then turn to Manson and his family to lead them. He believed the murders he orchestrated would help precipitate this war, or, failing that, would be blamed on black revolutionaries, thereby further fueling the racial tensions he desperately sought to exploit. His followers, isolated and indoctrinated, came to believe every word, their minds thoroughly warped by his pervasive influence. The true horror of Manson's vision unfolded in the sweltering heat of August 1969. The first strike came on the night of August 8th, 1969. Manson, tell you how to, frustrated by his inability to secure a recording contract and driven by a festering resentment against the Hollywood establishment, dispatched a group of his most devoted followers, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian to the home of actress Sharon Tate, wife of director Roman Polanski, at 10,050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon. This was not a random target. The house had previously been occupied by record producer Terry Melcher, who had effectively rejected Manson's music. Manson's directive was clear: total mess. That night, Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, was entertaining friends. Jay Sebring, a celebrity hairstylist, Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, and Wojciech Frykowski, Folger's boyfriend. A young man named Stephen Parent was also present, visiting the caretaker. The family members, armed with knives and a gun, scaled the fence and brutally murdered Parent as he was leaving. They then burst into the house, rounding up the terrified occupants. What followed was an act of unfathomable cruelty. Sebring was shot and stabbed multiple times. Frykowski was stabbed repeatedly and shot twice as he tried to escape. Folger was stabbed 28 times. Sharon Tate pleaded for her unborn child's life, but she was stabbed 16 times by Susan Atkins. Her last words were a plea for her baby. The attackers used Tate's blood to write pig on the front door, a chilling, taunting signature. Linda Kasabian, though present, did not participate in the killings and later became a key prosecution witness. The sheer savagery, the complete lack of empathy, and the seemingly senseless nature of the violence shocked a nation unaccustomed to such calculated depravity. The murders were terrifying in their randomness to the public, though they were deeply personal and strategic for Manson. The dream of a utopian society, which defined the 1960s, was shattered by this horrific reality. The very next night, August 9th, 1969, still seeking to ignite Helter Skelter, and further sow chaos. Manson himself accompanied Watson, Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten to the Los Feliz, home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Leno LaBianca was a supermarket executive, and Rosemary was his wife. Manson entered the home first, woke the couple, and tied them up. He then left, instructing the others to kill them. Leno LaBianca was stabbed 12 times and had war carved into his stomach. A knife and fork left protruding from his body. Rosemary LaBianca was stabbed 47 times. Death to pigs was scrawled on the walls in blood, and Rise was written on the refrigerator. The additional message, Helter Six Skelter, was written on the refrigerator door. The meticulous, ritualistic nature of these killings, the use of the victim's blood for messages, solidified the idea of a deeply disturbed, ideologically driven killer or killers. Los Angeles was gripped by terror. People fled the city, purchased firearms, and lived in a state of paranoia. The police were baffled, unable to immediately link the two sets of murders, believing they were unrelated and perhaps drug-related. The initial investigation was complicated by the seemingly disparate nature of the victims and the lack of a clear motive for such extreme violence. It took several months for connections to be made. Eventually, tips from drug users, and then the arrest of Susan Atkins on an unrelated charge, led to the unraveling of the family's dark secrets. Atkins, while jailed, boasted about her involvement in the Tate murders to her cellmates, who then reported her. Linda Kasabian, riddled with guilt, came forward and became a crucial witness for the prosecution, offering chilling details that illuminated the depth of Manson's control and the family's depravity. The trial of Charles Manson and his co-defendants, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten, was a sensational spectacle. It captivated the nation, offering a grotesque window into the dark underbelly of the counterculture movement. Manson, with his piercing eyes and etched swastika on his forehead, used the courtroom as a stage, performing bizarre antics, shouting prophecies, and maintaining his manipulative grip on his followers, even from behind bars. His followers, in turn, shaved their heads and sang songs to him, demonstrating a chilling devotion that defied conventional understanding. The prosecution, led by Vincent Bugliosi, meticulously laid out the case, demonstrating how Manson had brainwashed his followers into committing these heinous acts on his behalf, turning them into extensions of his own warped will. The concept of murder by proxy was chillingly brought to light. In 1971, Manson and his 3 female co-defendants were convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to death. These sentences were later commuted to life in prison when California abolished the death penalty in 1972. Charles Manson remained incarcerated until his death in 2017, a symbol of pure, unadulterated evil and the destructive power of a charismatic psychopath. His followers, though some eventually expressed remorse and were paroled decades later, continue to serve their sentences, living testaments to the devastating consequences of surrendering one's will to a malevolent force. The Manson family murders left an indelible scar on American society. They shattered the idealized image of the 1960s, revealing the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of peace and love movements. They highlighted the terrifying potential for cultic influence, the ease with which vulnerable individuals can be manipulated into committing unspeakable acts. The phrase helter-skelter became synonymous with apocalyptic madness, and Manson's face, with its vacant, intense stare, became an icon of pure evil. The legacy of the Manson family murders is not just the loss of innocent lives, but the unsettling realization that the human mind, when twisted by manipulation and delusion, is capable of unimaginable horrors. A chilling echo that still reverberates through our collective consciousness. It serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of sanity and the insidious nature of unchecked power. A story that quietly disquiets as the fire continues to burn, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. As the last tendrils of the Manson story settle into the quiet of the room, leaving a lingering chill in the air, we shift our gaze from the grand public horror of cultic violence to a more insidious, contained terror. Our next story is one of unimaginable cruelty hidden in plain sight, of years stolen, lives shattered, and the profound resilience of the human spirit in the face of absolute depravity. This is the story of Ariel Castro, the Cleveland kidnapper, a man who, for over a decade, turned his modest, ordinary house on Seymour Avenue into a private dungeon, a place of unspeakable suffering, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy in his suburban neighborhood. The saga of the Cleveland kidnappings begins not with a bang, but with a series of quiet disappearances that, for years, seemed to slip through the cracks of public awareness, filed away as runaways or tragic, unsolved mysteries. The first victim was Michelle Knight, who vanished on August 23, 2002, at the age of 21. She was last seen leaving a cousin's house. Her family reported her missing, but due to a series of unfortunate miscommunications and assumptions, police largely dismissed her disappearance, believing she had voluntarily left due to a custody dispute over her young son. The lack of immediate, intense investigation allowed her abductor to operate with impunity. Less than a year later, on April 21, 2003, Amanda Berry, then 16 years old, disappeared while walking home from her job at Burger King. Her mother, Luana Miller, launched a tireless campaign to find her daughter, appearing on television shows like America's Most Wanted and distributing countless flyers. Amanda's disappearance garnered significantly more public attention than Michelle's, but still no leads surfaced. The city of Cleveland, and indeed the nation, watched and waited. But hope slowly dwindled with each passing year. Then, on April 2nd, 2004, Gina DeJesus, a 14-year-old middle school student, vanished while walking home from school. Her disappearance galvanized the community, particularly because she was friends with Amanda Berry's cousin, further connecting the two cases in the public mind. Though no official link was made by law enforcement, Gina's family, like Amanda's, never gave up hope keeping her memory alive and the pressure on investigators. 3 young women, gone without a trace, in a city grappling with the raw pain of missing children. The disappearances created a pervasive sense of unease, a low hum of fear that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface of every day. Life in Cleveland. The man behind these disappearances was Ariel Castro, a seemingly ordinary 52-year-old former school bus driver. He lived in a 2-story house at 2207 Seymour Avenue, a quiet residential street in a working-class neighborhood. Castro presented a convincing public persona, a friendly, sometimes eccentric neighbor who played bass, guitar in local bands, and interacted regularly with community members. He was known to host barbecues, even participate in searches for the missing girls, and offered sympathetic words to Gina DeJesus's mother, knowing full well that Gina was held captive in his basement, just steps away. He had a family of his own adult children who occasionally visited the house, completely unaware of the horror unfolding beneath their feet. This chilling deception, the ability to maintain such a mundane existence while perpetrating unimaginable crimes, made his eventual discovery all the more horrifying. Behind the locked doors of 2207 Seymour Avenue, the reality was a living nightmare. Prieuse, Michelle, Amanda, and Gina were held captive in a meticulously hidden and brutally maintained dungeon. They were chained, sometimes naked, to poles, radiators, or the inside of a freezer. They were subjected to relentless physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. They were starved, deprived of light, hygiene, and human dignity. Loud music was often played to muffle their cries. They were allowed out of the basement only rarely, and only into small, enclosed areas of the house, often blindfolded. They were given buckets for toilets. Castro meticulously controlled their lives, tormenting them, threatening them, and isolating them from each other, only allowing them to interact on his terms. The psychological manipulation was as severe as the physical abuse. He would occasionally reward them with small privileges or pretend to let them leave, only to crush their hopes, further cementing his control. During her captivity, Amanda Berry gave birth to a daughter, Jocelyn. In December 2006, the father was Castro. The birth occurred in a plastic wading pool in the house, with Michelle Knight assisting under threat of death from Castro if anything went wrong. Jocelyn, too, spent her formative years in captivity, a child born into and confined within this horrific prison. The very existence of a child within this nightmare added another layer of profound horror to an already unspeakable situation. The years dragged on, each day an eternity of torment for the captives, each passing holiday a fresh heartbreak for their families. Hope for the victims had all but faded for the outside world. Yet, within the house on Seymour Avenue, the 3 women clung to life, to each other, and to the faint hope of rescue. Then, on May 6, 2013, after more than a decade of captivity, the nightmare abruptly ended. Ariel Castro had left the house, but had failed to properly secure one of the inner doors. Amanda Berry, hearing the opportunity, pushed her way through a locked outer door, breaking a panel, and screamed for help. A neighbor, Charles Ramsey, heard her cries and saw her desperate attempts to escape. He kicked in the lower part of the door, and Amanda, carrying her 6-year-old daughter, Jocelyn, crawled out to freedom. Her first words were a frantic plea to call 911. "I'm Amanda Berry. I've been on the news for 10 years." She told the dispatcher that 2 other women were still inside. Police arrived within minutes. Inside the dark, stifling house, they found Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus, disoriented but alive. The discovery sent shockwaves across Cleveland and around the world. The missing girls were found alive after all those years, held captive just a few miles from where they disappeared, in a seemingly ordinary house on an ordinary street. The media converged on Seymour Avenue, and the quiet neighborhood was transformed into a global focal point for a story of unbelievable horror and miraculous survival. Ariel Castro was arrested the same day, found at a nearby McDonald's. He was charged with hundreds of counts of kidnapping and rape. The details that emerged from the victims' testimonies during the investigation were beyond horrific, painting a picture of extreme, sustained cruelty. In a deal to avoid the death penalty, Castro pleaded guilty to 937 criminal counts, including aggravated murder for the forced termination of Michelle. Knight's pregnancies, she was made pregnant multiple times by Castro and brutally beaten until she miscarried. On August 1st, 2013, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years, ensuring he would never see freedom again. Just 1 month later, on September 3rd, 2013, Ariel Castro was found dead in his prison cell, having committed suicide by hanging. The legacy of the Cleveland kidnappings is complex. For the victims, Michelle Knight, who later changed her name to Lillian Rose Lee, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, their freedom marked the beginning of an arduous journey of recovery and healing. Their courage and resilience in the face of such prolonged torment became a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. They have since worked to rebuild their lives, advocating for missing persons and sharing their stories of survival, offering hope and inspiration to others. For the community of Cleveland, the case forced a painful reckoning with how such a horrific crime could have gone undetected for so long, hidden behind closed doors in a residential neighborhood. It raised questions about police procedures, community vigilance, and the disturbing reality that unimaginable evil can exist in the most unassuming of places. The house on Seymour Avenue, once a symbol of the ordinary, became a stark monument to terror. It was ultimately demolished in a symbolic act of reclaiming the neighborhood from its dark past. The story of Ariel Castro and his victims is not just about the crimes themselves, but about the profound psychological impact of sustained captivity and abuse, and the extraordinary human capacity for survival. It is a chilling reminder that appearances can be profoundly deceiving, that monsters do not always wear obvious guises, and that the greatest darkness can sometimes hide in the most mundane corners of our world. a quiet horror that settles deep within the bones, even as the fire crackles softly, offering its reassuring warmth. The flames continue their slow, mesmerizing dance, consuming the wood with a soft hiss and glow. We have journeyed through narratives of widespread terror and deeply concealed cruelty, each story peeling back a layer of what we understand about the shadows that can fall across human lives. The Manson family demonstrated the terrifying power of collective delusion and the shattering of societal norms, while the Ariel Castro case revealed the chilling banality of evil and the profound resilience of the human spirit under the most extreme duress. These are not tales meant to incite fear, but to offer a quiet contemplation on the complexities of our shared existence, to acknowledge the darker truths that sometimes lie beneath the surface of our peaceful world. Let the gentle warmth of Fireplace draw you deeper into a state of quiet reflection, preparing you for the tranquil journey into slumber, even as the echoes of these stories gently resonate. The fire continues to burn, its radiant heart glowing steadily, pushing back against the deep velvet of the night. The comforting scent of wood smoke fills the air, a primeval balm designed to soothe and settle the mind. We have navigated the chilling currents of human darkness, from the unseen menace to the insidious grip of control, and witnessed the profound resilience that emerges from the crucible of suffering. Tonight, as the flames dance and whisper their ancient stories, we will delve into two more tales that resonate with a quiet, persistent unease. We will explore the chilling reality of systemic failures and the terrifying power of unchecked dogma. Stories that remind us how easily the fabric of justice and humanity can fray under the weight of fear and delusion. Let the warmth envelop you, a gentle anchor as we contemplate these unsettling chapters of human experience, not to disturb, but to offer a deeper understanding of the world's complex shadows. Our first story takes us to a small, seemingly a town in Arkansas, a place where childhood innocence met unspeakable brutality, and where the ensuing search for justice became entangled in a web of fear, prejudice, and a profound miscarriage of justice. This is the haunting tale of the West Memphis Three, a narrative that speaks to the terrifying power of satanic panic and the devastating consequences of condemning the innocent. On the afternoon of May 5th, 1993, the quiet community of West Memphis, Arkansas, was shattered by an unspeakable horror. 3 8-year-old boys, Steve Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore, failed to return home after riding their bikes. Their disappearance sparked an immediate, frantic search by family members, neighbors, and law enforcement. The next day, their bodies were discovered in a muddy, wooded drainage ditch known as Robin Hood Hills. The scene was gruesome beyond belief. The boys had been hog-tied with their shoelaces, beaten and mutilated. Christopher Byers, in particular, had sustained horrific injuries, including castration. The brutality of the crime sent a wave of shock and revulsion through the tight-knit, predominantly conservative Bible Belt town. The nature of the wounds, particularly the mutilation, immediately led some in the community and law enforcement to speculate about a satanic ritual. It was the early 1990s, and America was still very much in the grip of the satanic panic, a moral hysteria fueled by sensationalized media reports, unsubstantiated claims from experts, and boat cults, ritual abuse, and devil worship. In this atmosphere, the most convenient suspects were often those who stood out, those who didn't quite fit the mold of mainstream society. Within weeks, the police focused their investigation on 3 teenagers who were known local outcasts. Kids who listened to heavy metal music, wore black, and were interested in subjects considered unconventional by the community. They were Damien Eccles, 18, a bright but rebellious young man who expressed interest in witchcraft, paganism, and the occult. Jason Baldwin, 16, Eccles' loyal friend, and Jesse Miskelly Jr., 17, who had learning disabilities and a significantly lower IQ. To many in West Memphis, these teenagers immediately fit the profile of what they believed a Satanist would look like. The narrative of devil worshippers sacrificing children quickly took root, overshadowing any objective investigation into the actual evidence. The case against the West Memphis Three, as they soon became known, was built largely on coerced confessions, pay, and circumstantial evidence, rather than direct forensic links. Jesse Miskelly Jr., after being interrogated for nearly 12 hours without a parent or lawyer present, and despite repeatedly denying involvement, eventually gave a rambling, inconsistent, highly unreliable confession. He recanted it almost immediately, but it was enough for the prosecution. This confession, which contradicted key facts of the crime, was then used as leverage against Eccles and Baldwin. The prosecution's theory was that Eccles was the mastermind, leading his 2 acolytes in a satanic ritual murder. The trials, held in 1994, were deeply contentious. The prosecution presented an emotionally charged case, appealing to the jury's fears of Satanism. Evidence included testimonies from experts on the occult whose methods and conclusions were later widely discredited, and the dubious confession of Miskelly. There was no physical evidence linking any of the 3 teenagers to the crime scene. No DNA, no fingerprints, no weapons. The defense argued that the prosecution lacked credible evidence, and that the focus on Satanism was a baseless distraction. Despite the glaring weaknesses in the prosecution's case, the jury, swayed by the pervasive fear and the emotional testimony surrounding the satanic panic narrative, delivered guilty verdicts. Damien Eccles, deemed the leader, was sentenced to death. Jason Baldwin received a life sentence, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. was sentenced to life plus 2 20-year sentences. Justice, it seemed, had been served in the eyes of West Memphis. But for a growing number of people outside the small town, this verdict felt profoundly wrong. The story of the West Memphis Three did not end with their convictions. It became a cause célèbre for advocates of justice, drawing national and international attention. Documentaries, starting with HBO's Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, 1996, meticulously exposed the flaws in the investigation. and trial, raising serious doubts about their guilt. These films, along with books and media reports, galvanized a movement for their exoneration. Celebrities like Johnny Depp, Eddie Vedder, Henry Rollins, and Peter Jackson lent their voices and resources to the courts, funding appeals and legal teams, pushing for re-examination of the evidence. Over the next 2 decades, the case endured a long and arduous appeals process. New forensic techniques, particularly DNA testing, became available. DNA collected from the crime scene, previously unavailable or not thoroughly tested, was re-examined. While no DNA directly linked Eccles, Baldwin, or Miss Kelly to the murders, DNA from other unknown individuals was found at the scene. This crucial development strongly suggested that someone else was involved, undermining the original prosecution's case. Furthermore, the supposed confession of Jesse Miskelly Jr. was picked apart, revealing inconsistencies and evidence of police coercion. Finally, in August 2011, after 18 years in prison, the West Memphis Three were released. Their release came through an unusual legal maneuver called an Alford plea. Under an Alford plea, a defendant maintains their innocence but concedes that the prosecution has enough evidence to likely convict them if the case were retried. This allowed them to walk free while still asserting their innocence effectively, ending the state's ability to prosecute them again. It was a compromise, a bittersweet victory for the men who had lost their youth and freedom. But it was freedom nonetheless. The story of the West Memphis Three is a chilling testament to the dangers of mass hysteria and the profound vulnerability of the justice system when swayed by societal fear and prejudice. It highlights how quickly a community can turn against its own, condemning those who are different based on superficial characteristics rather than concrete evidence. The case left an enduring mystery. Who truly killed the 3 young boys in Robin Hood Hills? Despite the release of Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly, the original murders remain officially unsolved. The shadow of that horrific crime and the subsequent failures of justice continues to loom over West Memphis, a constant, unsettling reminder of how easily the truth can be obscured and how difficult it is to fully repair the damage of injustice. It is a story that lingers in the quiet, a stark echo in the gentle crackle of the fire, a reminder of the fragility of justice in the face of fear. As the echoes of injustice from West Memphis slowly fade into the warmth of the fire, we turn our attention to a different kind of darkness, one born not of external prejudice, but of internal manipulation and an apocalyptic vision. Our next story transports us from the quiet American South to the dense, humid jungles of Guyana, where a charismatic yet deeply disturbed leader led his followers down a path of utopian dreams that ended in the horrific reality of mass murder and suicide. This is the chilling tale of Jonestown and the ultimate, tragic implosion of the People's Temple. The story begins with Jim Jones, a complex and compelling figure who emerged from the American Midwest in the 1950s. Jones was a pastor with a powerful, magnetic personality and a vision of social justice. He founded the People's Temple Full Gospel Church in Indiana in 1955, initially preaching a message of racial equality and communal living, advocating for the poor and marginalized, pinned in a racially segregated America. His integrated congregation and commitment to social programs attracted a diverse following, particularly African Americans, the elderly, and the disillusioned youth of the 1960s. Jones cultivated an image of a compassionate leader, a healer, and a prophet, often performing miracles that were later exposed as elaborate deceptions. Raw, as the years passed, the People's Temple grew in size and influence. Jones moved his operations to California in the 1970s, establishing large congregations in San Francisco and Los Angeles. He became politically active, wielding significant power due to his ability to deliver large blocks of voters. His followers were deeply devoted, drawn by his promises of a utopian socialist society, free from racism, poverty, and war. They often donated their life savings and property to the temple, severing ties with outside family and friends, becoming entirely dependent on Jones and his organization. This isolation was a key step in strengthening Jones's absolute control. However, beneath the veneer of communal harmony and social justice, a darker reality was festering. Jim Jones became increasingly paranoid, dictatorial, and addicted to drugs, amphetamines, and barbiturates. He subjected his followers to psychological, fire, and physical abuse, public humiliations, and severe punishments for minor infractions. Temple members worked long hours, were deprived of sleep, and subjected to white nights, all-night meetings, where Jones would rant about external enemies and demand absolute loyalty, simulating potential crises and loyalty tests. Those who questioned him were severely beaten, sexually abused, or drugged. Defectors were harassed and threatened. Jones created an intricate system of informants, fostering an atmosphere of pervasive fear and mistrust among the members, making sure no one could truly trust anyone but him. As scrutiny from the media and concerned relatives of temple members grew, Jones's paranoia intensified. He became convinced that the U.S. government and various external forces were conspiring to destroy the People's Temple. In the mid-1970s, he began planning a mass exodus to a remote, self-sufficient agricultural commune he established in the South American jungle in Guyana. He called it Jonestown. In 1977, Jones and over 900 of his most devoted followers relocated to Jonestown. The vision was of a socialist paradise, a haven from the supposed evils of capitalist America. The reality was a desolate, isolated settlement deep in the jungle, surrounded by armed guards, where members were forced into grueling labor, subjected to constant indoctrination, and lived under Jones's absolute tyrannical rule. Passports were confiscated. Communications with the outside world were strictly controlled, and attempts to leave were met with severe retribution. Jones's mental state deteriorated further and his drug abuse became more rampant. He frequently spoke of revolutionary suicide as the ultimate act of defiance against their perceived enemies. That the growing concerns from relatives in the United States, who formed a group called Concerned Relatives, eventually prompted a formal investigation. On November 14th, 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan, along with a delegation of journalists and some concerned relatives, arrived in Jonestown to investigate allegations of abuse and forced imprisonment. Jones put on a facade of a thriving, happy community. But during the visit, some temple members secretly slipped notes to the delegation, pleading for help to escape. On November 18th, 1978, as Congressman Ryan and his delegation prepared to depart from a nearby airstrip, their plane was ambushed by armed temple guards. Congressman Ryan, 3 journalists, and 1 defecting temple member were brutally murdered. This act of violence was the final, irreversible step down a path of no return for Jim Jones. He knew that the killings would bring immediate and severe consequences from the U.S. government back in Jonestown. Immediately after the airstrip massacre, Jones gathered his followers. Over the commune's loudspeaker system, he announced that the White Knight had come, and it was time for their final act of revolutionary suicide. He urged his followers to drink a poisoned, fruit-flavored drink laced with cyanide, tranquilizers, pear, and sedatives. What followed was a horrifying scene of calculated mass murder and suicide. Infants and young children were given the poison first, squirted into their mouths by their parents or other temple members. Adults then lined up to drink the lethal concoction. Some willingly complied, brainwashed into believing it was an act of political protest and spiritual transcendence. Others were forced, held down by armed guards as the poison was administered. Cries of pain and distress mingled with Jones's rambling, distorted exhortations over the loudspeaker, urging them towards their beautiful death. By the time Guyanese authorities and us military personnel reached Jonestown, a scene of unimaginable horror awaited them. More than 900 bodies lay sprawled across the compound, victims of the mass poisoning. Among the dead were over 300 children. Jim Jones was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head, likely self-inflicted. It was the largest single loss of American civilian life in a non-natural disaster until the attacks of September 11, 2001. The aftermath was a global shockwave. The images of hundreds of bodies, the chilling audio recording of Jones's final pronouncements during the death tape, and the revelations of the atrocities committed in Jonestown stunned the world. The tragedy forced a painful reckoning with the dynamics of cults, the dangers of charismatic leaders, the psychological manipulation of vulnerable individuals, and the terrifying consequences of unchecked power. The legacy of Jonestown is a stark warning. It serves as a chilling case study in extreme psychological control, isolation, and the seductive, yet ultimately destructive, nature of utopian ideals gone horribly wrong. It highlighted how easily a message of hope and liberation can be twisted into a tool for absolute dominion leading to unimaginable suffering and mass death. The profound loss of life at Jonestown remains a haunting testament to the fragility of individual autonomy when confronted with relentless indoctrination and the insidious power of a leader who demands unwavering, unquestioning loyalty. The story of Jonestown is not just a historical event. It is a timeless, cautionary tale, a chilling whisper in the quiet of the night, a somber echo that settles into the stillness, even as the fireplace provides its comforting, unwavering light. The fire has dwindled to a soft, glowing bed of embers, casting a gentle, ruddy light across the room. The air is still, permeated with a faint, comforting scent of residual warmth. We have journeyed through some of the darker chambers of human experience tonight, from the unseen terror of the Zodiac, the deceptive normalcy of beat decay, the cultic depths of Manson and Jonestown, to the hidden cruelty of Ariel Castro and the devastating injustice of the West Memphis Three. Each story, in its own way, offers a glimpse into the profound complexities of human nature, reminding us of the shadows that can fall across our lives, and the often unseen resilience that emerges from them. These are not tales told to frighten, but to quiet the mind through contemplation, to acknowledge the spectrum of human experience, even its most unsettling facets. The fireplace, our constant companion, has been a beacon of warmth and security, a symbol of the peace we seek as we prepare for rest. Let the lingering impressions of these narratives settle gently, not as burdens, but as quiet reflections on the intricate tapestry of life itself. The world outside is hushed. The fire offers its final, tender glow. May your mind find peace, and your sleep be deep and undisturbed by the passing shadows of the night.